Chinese media, and especially from the Prime Minister and his office, we want to have a closer liaison. We have probably one of the most deepest, strongest relationship between China and Pakistan. But the interaction between our medias, our cultural interaction is not as good as a political relationship. So this idea, meeting today, is basically to improve this interaction. I especially want to take this occasion to congratulate China and the Communist Party. I think on its 100th, it is the anniversary of the CPC. Also, in Pakistan, we admire President Xi Jinping as one of the great statesmen of the modern world. We have admiration for him in Pakistan for two particular reasons. One, his commitment to fight corruption. The commitment that a society there must be rule of law in a society. In other words, the powerful must be brought under the law. And corruption is, when it destroys a country, it is when there is a corrupt elite which does not bring itself under the rule of law, and they are the ones who do the maximum damage. So I have watched the corruption drive, anti-corruption drive of President Xi Jinping, and we here in Pakistan are very impressed by the way he has so many high-level officials, ministerial-level people have been held accountable for their corruption. Secondly, and the most remarkable thing about China, which we all admire, is that the way they have brought so many millions of people out of poverty. The figure we are told is almost 700 million people have been brought out of poverty in the last 6-7 years. And recently, China announced that China has finally eliminated extreme poverty. So this is, I think, one of the most remarkable achievements of any human society. I don't think there is any precedent in history of a society achieving these great goals. And the third thing is that we in Pakistan are committed to strengthen our relationship with China politically, as well as in terms of economy and trade. CPEC is a flagship program in the BRI, and for Pakistan it is one of a program which gives us the greatest optimism and hope for our future economic development. And we have a high-level committee now to follow the CPEC projects. I'm going to Gwadar next week to oversee the projects, the pace which they are moving on, and to make sure that we meet our timelines. And then I'm hoping,
Chinese labor also.
yes, meeting the Chinese labor, who are working here, and yes, talk to them, interact with them. But also, I look forward to my trip to China, which is in the offing in the next month, 2 months, and to further strengthen both our political ties and our economic ties. Please go ahead.
So, as Your Highness just say, that in 2020 the Communist Party already make a huge success in helping its people eliminate poverty. Also, it helps the country to navigate its people throughout the pandemic while achieve the positive GDP growth. So the CPC is continually using its people-centered policy, so towards its people and towards governing this country. So how do you comment on this people-centered policy, and how do you think is CPC's role in the development of China?
You see, the CPC is a unique model. Until now, we were told that the best way of societies improving themselves is the Western system of democracy. And we were told that that is the best way of progress of a society. But what the CPC has done is that it has brought this alternate model, and they have actually beaten all Western democracies in the way they have brought up merit in the society. You see, what is remarkable, a society succeeds if that society has systems which bring two things forward: meritocracy and accountability. Accountability of the ruling elite, which means a transparent system, which is very important for progress, and secondly, which brings up merit in a society. So until now, the feeling was that democracy is electoral democracy is the best way, where you get merit, leadership based on merit, and then hold that leadership accountable. But what CPC has done is that without that electoral democracy, it has actually achieved that and much better. What I saw in China when I visited the Communist Party headquarters and when they gave us briefings, their system of sifting talent and then grooming it and bringing it up, for me, is probably more remarkable than any democratic electoral democracy does not bring up that sort of meritocracy or can hold people accountable. And third thing is that it's a very flexible system. You know, when they want to change something, that system allows them to bring a change. In our society, for instance in Pakistan, even in Western democracies, it's very difficult to bring change in a system because you're stuck in so many regulations, and democracy straitjackets you. So you cannot always do what is the best for the society because of all the impediments in our system. Whereas I find that in the greatness of the way China has improved so quickly is because they make changes very quickly. They feel that something is not working, they change it. The system allows them to change. And fourthly, of course, the long-term planning. They plan so far ahead. Sometimes in a democracy, you only, I mean in an electoral democracy, you only look for the next 5 years, and it contradicts long-term planning.
Hi, Prime Minister. Very grateful. Thank you for hosting this meeting online. I'm Lucian from China Daily. And another question, it's been 7 years since China and Pakistan established the diplomatic relationship as well as the friendship between the two. So among all the projects that the two sides have worked on, where do you see the future development direction and the cooperation direction of the China-Pakistan economic rail, and which areas could be the focus points in the next few years? And how do you think of the importance of such cooperation for both countries? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You see, for me, where I see this relationship moving ahead, and I mean the economic relationship, because there is the political relationship which is also very strong and moving ahead. But purely the economic relationship, I see the next phase of CPAC. And the next phase is for Pakistan, which is very exciting. We have these special economic zones, and we hope that we hope to attract Chinese industry into these special economic zones by giving them incentives, because in Pakistan the labor is much cheaper than in China, so we hope to attract that industry which will benefit from our cheaper labor. And secondly, where we really want help from China, and we're already working on it, is agriculture. Because in China, the productivity, your agricultural productivity is much higher than Pakistan. Pakistan is basically an agricultural country. And we haven't really concentrated so much on our agriculture to improve our productivity. So this is the second phase, because almost half our population lives off agriculture. And therefore, we hope that we can really benefit from the latest techniques in agriculture from China.
So, Your Highness, my second question is related to the first one. I think you just made a great insight about the Communist Party's way of socialism democracy and also the Western-style electoral democracy. So my second question is, how do you view the leadership style of Xi Jinping as the core of the CPC party? What kind of image do you think he creates on the international stage?
You see, President Xi Jinping, when I spoke to him, and Premier Li, what struck me was that the process which they have come through to become the Prime Minister and the President, they started work 30 years ago, and they started working right from the canton, the real village level. And from there, they worked all the way up. They went through all the processes. So really, it's that long struggle which is what makes a leader. And that sort of process is not prevalent in most of the countries that claim to have electoral democracy. You do not have that sort of process. So you look at the American president, he does not go through that sort of rigorous training for leadership like President Xi Jinping and Premier Li, and the way they work themselves up and the experience they got all the way from village and then to the province and higher levels. So when they get to the top, they are experienced. They completely understand the system. They understand how people live at the bottom. And which is why they have been able to, create this wonder of bringing so many millions of people out of poverty. So this is something quite unique for China. You do not see that in any other democratic system.
What about their image on the international stage?
I think, leave alone the rivalry now between America and China, this economic rivalry. But I can tell you that the world, no matter whatever they think of China, because there's a fear of China's economic dominance now. But apart from that, everyone has to admire what President Xi Jinping has done. His achievements, you see, leaders' achievements speak for themselves. And that's what President Xi Jinping has proved to the world.
Your Excellency, how do you comment on the aid programs provided by China to Pakistan, including vaccine, infrastructure, vocational training, and in other social livelihood sectors?
I think, first of all, the way China dealt with COVID was unique. I mean, considering that this pandemic started in China, the way China coped with it, and then when you look at the rest of the world, China really stands out in the way they dealt with this pandemic. And we are very thankful to China because, the way they helped us, the way they donated the vaccine to us. And really, Pakistan is after China, Pakistan is one of those countries which has actually done very well in the way that we dealt with the pandemic, the way which we coped with it. So Pakistan stands out, in this whole region. And one of the reasons is that China provided us the vaccine very early on, and where we immediately vaccinated the health workers. The first thing we did was vaccinate the health workers, and then went for the vulnerable groups. So, the people who were most at risk and we were all worried about were the health workers, because, they had to deal with the patients. And so we were always worried that, if they became demoralized, then, our health system would fail. So when we were able to, thanks to China, we were able to vaccinate them, that gave us a lot of confidence.
My name is Liu Xin. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you, even via Zoom, on this very prosperous occasion when China is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of the CPC. But this year is also a very special year for China and Pakistan, as both countries are celebrating 70 years of diplomatic relations, 70 years of friendship. So I'd like to ask you, based on what you just talked about the uniqueness of the Chinese system and the kind of strong relationship that Pakistan has fostered with China, what do you think the 70 years of friendship between China and Pakistan means for the region and for the world? And where do you see relations going further? How to deepen these already very strong ties? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, firstly, let me just talk about Pakistan and China first, and then the region. For Pakistan, there was always a very special relationship with China, although our relationship started 70 years ago. But, you know, China, whenever Pakistan was in trouble, whenever I'm in trouble politically, internationally, when we had conflicts with our neighbor, China always stood with us. So the people of China have a special place in the hearts of people of Pakistan. Because everyone here remembers, you know, you only remember a friend who stands with you in your difficult times. In good times, everyone stands with you. But in your difficult, tough times, bad times, you remember those people who stood by you. That's why you will find that in Pakistan, people always have a special fondness for people of China. So this relationship has only got stronger. Even now, politically, you know, on the international forums, Pakistan and China always stand together. And now, when you talk about the region, there's this strange great power rivalry taking place. You know, you see the United States and the United States being wary of China, and you know, I don't need to say all this is now public knowledge. You know, the way China and the United States are sort of looking at each other. So it creates problem, because what United States is doing is it's formed this regional alliance called the Quad, which is US, India, and then a couple of other countries. So from that point of view, Pakistan thinks that it is very unfair for the US or other powers, Western powers, for countries like us to take sides. Why do we have to take sides? We should have good relationship with everyone. And it's not going to happen that if there's pressure put on Pakistan to change its relationship or downgrade its relationship with China, it won't happen, because the relationship between Pakistan and China is very deep. And it's not just the governments, it's a people-to-people relationship. So to sum up, whatever will happen, our relationship between the two countries, no matter what pressure is put on us, is not going to change.
But how do you deepen these already very strong ties, Your Excellency?
Number one is trade. The CPEC is it's right in front of you. It's something. It's the biggest thing happening in Pakistan. For us, this is where we think our economic future is moving towards. So this is a big economic feature in Pakistan. And then there's the political relationship. And political relationship has got stronger. And it's got stronger because whatever happens in every international forum, Pakistan and China stand together.
Mr. Prime Minister, my second question is about Olympic Games. Beijing will host the 2022 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games next year. So, Your Excellency, how do you comment on China's efforts to host the Games, and what are your expectations for the Games?
Well, I watched on television, of course, the Olympics in China. And you always find that a country that is on the ascendancy, its sports also follows in the same direction. It also, in sporting, China, if you look back, China's performance 30 years ago, and now you compare now in Olympics, China is now the emerging power in sports as well. So the two go together, because all the skills, the institutionalization that goes into a nation building and a nation moving forward are exactly the same in which a nation's sports move forward. Because you compete internationally in sports, the better you become, the better your institutions become, which can sift talent and bring merit on the top. So a small country like New Zealand just now, I know you don't play cricket in China, but a country which of 5 million people has just won the Cricket World Championship from India, which has 1.3 billion people. And 5 million people, a country of 5 million people has actually won a championship against them, because they have a very good system of sifting, bringing up talent and polishing it. So countries clearly which institutionalize better, they move upwards, because the system of polishing the talent in the country is better than the others.
What about China's efforts to prepare for this game, especially in this difficult time of COVID-19?
Well, we are just watching in Japan also they're having problems of hosting Olympics. And there's a lot of problem because of COVID. The answer is I don't know really, because we do not know the trajectory of the COVID situation. You think that you've now got under control, and then you have some Delta variant coming in, and then again people get worried. So it's world is coming to terms with this disease, this pandemic. So we're not in a position right now to make very firm calculations and decisions about the future right now. So the answer is I don't know.
Good wishes are to China.
Yes, we wish them all the best.
योर एक्सेलेंसी मैं ये पूछना चाहूँगा कि चीन की जानिब से सिंकियांग में जो मुख्तलिफ इक़दामात उठाए जा रहे हैं, उसे अमरीका और चंद दीगर मगरबी ममालिक की जानिब से नस्ल कुशी करार दिया जा रहा है. और अभी G7 का जो समिट हुआ था उसका एलामिया जारी किया गया 13 जून को. उसमें हांगकांग, सिंकियांग और चंद दीगर जो चीन के इक़दामात हैं उस पर बेबुनियाद तनकीद की गई है. तो आपकी इस बारे में क्या राय है?
You see, first of all, our interaction with the Chinese officials, that version of what is happening in Xinjiang is completely different to the version of what we hear from the Western media and the Western governments. So, because we have a very strong relationship with China, and because we have a relationship based on trust, so we actually accept the Chinese version. You know, what they say about their programs in Xinjiang, so we accept it. The second point is that we find it a little bit hypocritical when there are much worse human rights issues in the world which get no attention. For instance, in Kashmir. Kashmir is a huge human rights problem. There are about 9 million, 8 million Kashmiris which are basically have been put into an open prison until recently. It's a police state where there are extrajudicial killings, there's imprisonment, there's arbitrary arrests and a ban on media, and yet there is hardly any adverse comment in the Western media. 100,000 Kashmiris have died in the last 30 years for a freedom struggle. It's a disputed territory. Yet you hardly get any coverage in the Western media, and we hear about Xinjiang and Hong Kong, which is a bit hypocritical.
दूसरा सवाल मैं पूछना चाहूँगा वैक्सीनेशन के हवाले से। खुशाइन बात यह है कि पाकिस्तान में हुकूमत की जानिब से वैक्सीनेशन का आगाज़ किया गया और लोग जौक दर जौक इसमें हिस्सा ले रहे हैं, और ख़ास तौर पर चीनी वैक्सीन साइनोफार्म, साइनोवैक और कैंसाइनो लगाई जा रही है। इस दौरान वबाई सूरत हाल के दौरान जो चीन और पाकिस्तान का ताउन रहा और अब भी जारी है, उस हवाले से आपकी राय जानना चाहेंगे।
China helped us in the beginning, and because of that we were able to vaccinate our health workers and the vulnerable sections, the senior sections of the society. And even now we have a very close collaboration going on with China. We are expecting another consignment coming soon. And so today we are expecting a consignment. And it is one reason that we have really been able to cope with this pandemic compared to all our neighbors.
Yeah, this is the CMT family conference. So the previous reporters have already asked questions that I want to ask. So I want to ask a follow-up question regarding Xinjiang. We noticed that recently some Western media criticized you only because you didn't criticize China's policy in Xinjiang. So some media even said that this should help China fight silence over Uyghurs. So what's your response to these voices?
So I just answered this question, which I think it's, we have, with our interactions with the Chinese government, the Chinese version is completely different to the version which we hear from the Western media and the Western government. So because of our close proximity and relationship to China, we actually accept the Chinese version. And I again repeat, we find it very hypocritical that while the Uyghurs' situation is highlighted so much, and Hong Kong, on the other hand, Kashmir, which is a disputed territory between Pakistan and India, and the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which gave the Kashmiris the right to choose their own destiny through a plebiscite, yet there's hardly any mention of Kashmir, where 100,000 of Kashmiris have died. So this is what we find in Pakistan very hypocritical.
Now we notice that some people claim that a closer Pakistan-China relations will intensify conflicts in the region because of India. So what's your comment?
Pakistan and China were always close, but I think this idea that India is supposed to counterbalance China for the Western world, I think this is going to be very detrimental for China. For India, not for China. China is too strong. The benefits India will get from trade with China are far greater than India trying to act as a sort of counterbalance. The country that will lose out is going to be India. The relationship, as I said, between China and Pakistan actually has nothing to do with India. We have 70 years of diplomatic relationship, and through all crises in Pakistan's history, China has stood with us. So it really has nothing to do with India. Our relationship is a bilateral relationship, is extremely strong.
His Excellency, my question is, now Pakistan and China have set an example for the world about solidarity and cooperation in facing the global challenges. And how do you think the importance of building a closer China-Pakistan community of shared destiny and shared future for mankind?
I think what I experienced when I went to, on the invitation of President Xi Jinping, what I noticed was the amount of work China is now doing in terms of improving the environment, fighting global warming, the awareness in China. In fact, President Xi Jinping hosted a program now I forget what city is, a special city which is just built. It's an environmentally green city, specifically built, which we were invited to. I don't remember the name of the city, but we went there and everything there is environmentally friendly. So China is making great strides towards that. And I think the future of mankind, the biggest threat mankind faces is through this climate change, global warming. And China really, when President Xi Jinping hosted this conference, he invited leaders from all over the world, and it was just, the theme was how to save mankind from this catastrophe which is called climate change and global warming.
Yes. Thank you so much, Excellency, for giving us this opportunity, and it's really great honor for us. My question is that the first phase of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor CPEC yields fruitful results in different areas, including energy and infrastructure. First, how do you comment on this? And second, how will China and Pakistan cooperate to ensure the success of second phase of CPEC? Especially, how do you see Sino-Pak economic growth? Thank you, Excellency.
Firstly, the first phase of CPEC was connectivity, and then energy projects. So that was the first phase, because Pakistan had problems with, we were shortage of energy, and then of course the connectivity, which is what the CPEC initially was. Now the second phase is now deeper cooperation, and that is, from Pakistan point of view, the special economic zones. And the idea is to attract investment into these special economic zones, which will help employment in Pakistan, improve our growth rate, create wealth for our country. But equally important for us is help from China in our agriculture. Now, half of our population lives off agriculture, and the productivity of our agriculture, unfortunately, is extremely low. So we have compared the productivity in China, which compared to us is much higher, and then all the various technologies which are used in agriculture. So the second phase is for us our special economic zones, agriculture, also skills education. We are collaborating in getting skills education in Pakistan.
How you will speed up this China-Pakistan economic cooperation?
We have already, now we formed a committee, which is, the whole point of that committee, the CPEC committee, is to monitor the CPEC projects and make sure that there are no impediments in their way.
Your Excellency, my last question is about the future, the near future of international relations. As we're seeing with the new U.S. administration, there seems to be the talk of alliance of like-minded countries to counter some kind of a, other system or country. What is your understanding? How do you look at the trend, and what do you think is the implication if such a trend really picks up momentum?
I find this deeply worrying for the world. I find this rivalry for no rhyme or reason. I find this worrying because then, just like in the Cold War, the world was divided between the Soviet camp and then the American camp. And so it created a lot of problems for countries who, they had to choose sides, either one side or the other. And then, for a short while, there was this, the whole worry was this war on terror, and the whole world was somehow involved in fighting terrorism. And now we see this emerging rivalry between China and the Western countries led by the US. Again, it's worrying. And people in Pakistan, we ask ourselves the question, why do we have to choose sides? We have a very deep relationship with China. And if someone asks us to choose sides, we find that China is our friend for 70 years through highs and lows. They've stood with us. So people in Pakistan have this great faith and trust in our friendship with people in China. So why should we be asked to take sides now? Why can't we have a relationship with everyone? And this is the feeling right now, because I think this this what past tells us, this world divided into camps, we find that this is detrimental to the world.
How do you see things unfolding in Afghanistan?
Well, that's the most difficult question you asked me. Unfortunately, right now we do not have the answer because no one has the answer. You see, what the let me just say, the biggest mistake made by the Americans was that they kept on trying to find a military solution in Afghanistan when there was not one. They kept doing the same thing over and over and over again and thought they would get a different result. Because Afghanistan has a history, and they just cannot be dictated from outside. They do not accept outside power intervention. They do not like to be controlled from powers from outside. That's the history. And so even when countries have conquered Afghanistan, like the British did in the 19th century, and then the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 20th century, you can invade in Afghanistan, but when you stay there, it is very difficult to control the country because they are very independent-minded people. So this war in Afghanistan went on too long. It has created deep divisions in the Afghan society. When a war goes on for that long, when on both sides people have died, families have suffered, to bring them back together is not very easy. It takes time. And now what you're seeing in Afghanistan is that the moment the Americans decided there was no military solution, they gave a date of exit. And the moment they gave a date of exit, the Taliban, who were opposing the Americans, considered that as a victory. Now, when they think they won the war, it's very difficult to make them, from Pakistan point of view, to make them then come to some sort of a political settlement becomes very difficult. One, because the war went on too long, there are deep divisions. Secondly, once they feel they won the war, it's very difficult to make them now get back together. And so the worrying thing for Pakistan is that if Afghanistan has a civil war there, just like it had civil war after the Soviets left in 1989, then the consequences will be, after Afghanistan, the country that will suffer the most is going to be Pakistan. Because, we have a long border with Afghanistan. Taliban is basically a Pashtun movement, and there are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than Afghanistan. Half the Afghanistan population is Pashtun. So the worry here is that we will be deeply affected by if there is a civil war. So therefore we want there to be a political settlement at all costs.
So before concluding this session, I would like to inform the media that Prime Minister has written a special congratulatory letter to President Xi on CPC's 100 years anniversary. Also, Prime Minister has written an op-ed that will appear in Chinese media. I believe this opinion piece, and also keeping in view the close relationship and the kind of the way CPAC is going, we will interact with Chinese media more regularly, and we will keep inviting friends from Beijing.
सूख गए दाग, अब कोई नहीं निकाल सकता।
जो कोई नहीं कर सकता वही तो चैंपियन करता है। नया बेहतर सर्फ एक्सेल, इसकी स्टेन लिफ्टर टेक्नोलॉजी कपड़ों की तह में जाके सख्त सूखे दाग भी खींच निकाले। नया सर्फ एक्सेल, दागों का चैंपियन।
स्कॉच ब्राइट में है स्टेन कटिंग टेक्नोलॉजी और पायदारी जो सफाई करे तेज और चले ज्यादा। चूज राइट स्कॉच ब्राइट।
मेरी निमको की दुकान के लिए एक जलेबी वाला मिल जाए, बिजनेस दुगना हो जाएगा। आजकल कपड़े इतने साफ और महकदार कैसे?
सनलाइट 2-in-1।
सफाई के साथ महक भी इसी में है। ऐसा भी हो सकता है?
जैसे जलेबी बनाने वाले